Hello and welcome to this lecture where we are going to continue from what we studied in the previous video by exploring group policy management. In this video, we are going to dive straight in to understand how do you create a group policy. Now, we can see that we already viewed a default domain policy that has a scope and details and settings that doesn't really have a lot of things that are configured. So we want to explore what it is to create a group policy. To create a group policy, obviously the best practice is you would obviously be creating a policy to apply to a group of people, or a group of users, or a group of computers. So that would mean that those group of users or group of computers need to already be in a specific cluster called organizational units. It's only organizational units that you can apply group policies to. You can see that we don't really have any containers in there that we can see in Active Directory that exists there. It's only OUs. All the folder-like icons are having these icons in the middle of them. Like I explained some time ago, the difference between containers and OUs. The reason why OUs are more secured is that they have the ability to apply group policies to them. So at the moment, you can see that this default domain policy is as it is underneath /local forest or domain. That means that everything underneath that is being applied to the default domain policy is going to be applied to it. But what if you want to create a custom domain policy that's going to be probably only relating to, say, the sales and marketing department? To do that, it means you need to go and create a default, a specific custom group policy that is only going to apply to the sales and marketing department. So to create any group policy, you right click on the OU and you go to create a GPO in this domain and link it here. And we'll give it a name. And this policy would call it sales and marketing GPO or domain policy. Right? Click OK. Once that's created, you'd realize that we now have the custom domain policy right underneath it, which means this is a policy that's linked to this OU. So when you go into it at the moment, you can see that by default it has its settings to be just out of the box. It needs to be manually configured. It was created at this date and time, see, which is similar to this and this. And once you have the domain policy created, now we need to move to the next step, which is to edit the policies. So we're going to dive in to see what are some of the things that the policy allows us to manage. So you right click on the policy and you click on edit. When you click on edit, it's going to open another snap-in, which is the group policy management editor. You can see the difference. This is group policy management, and then you have group policy management editor. I'm just going to make this bigger again so that we can have a proper view. So when you're in the editor mode, which is the sales and marketing domain policy, you'd realize that we have two factions. We have computer configuration and we have user configuration. But you realize that we have two containers that has the policy settings. So we have policies and we have preferences. Policies and preferences, identical. Policies is where you make changes to configurations that are, it's more like it's saved. When it's applied, nothing can be changed about it when you're the impacting point of view, when you're whoever the policy is going to be applied to. It doesn't give you any options to make alternative changes to whatever is being applied to you, for instance. And it doesn't give you the option. It's not, if you create a policy in there, for instance, for desktop background change, you're not going to have the option to choose out of either changing the desktop background for yourself and then choose between whatever was configured and maybe use yours. it's going to be whatever desktop background is assigned to you. But if it was done in the preferences, it means it gives you the option to choose an alternative option in that configuration. But then when you log out and you log back in again, it's going to go back to whatever it was set to. But then you have the option to change it. So those are the differences between policies and preferences. So we're going to expand policies for computer configuration and user configuration. So you'd realize that it's the same menu. It's the same menu of items that you're looking at. Policies, software settings, Windows administrative, software, Windows administrative, right? But the key thing here is these are policies configurations that are going to be related to computer configurations, and these are user configurations. So I'm just going to expand certain things, like when you go to software settings. So this is where you can go with software installation, and if you want to deploy a specific, so we're in the sales and marketing domain policy. When we have specific piece of software that members within the marketing department need to have as basic software on all their machines, every marketing or every sales and marketing staff need to have these pieces of software on the machine. For instance, a Zoom video conferencing client. Then we can use this to configure a policy where whenever a user is within this OU, they should have that software installed on your machine. So it's going to be based on whoever is in that whatever container or whatever software, whatever organizational unit is applied to, which is a sales and marketing domain policy. Windows settings will give you information on a lot of things, like for instance, security settings that has to do with account policies, local policies, and a whole lot of things that are related to computer configuration. When you go to the same settings that we just opened from the user configuration point of view, we also have software installation. We also have Windows settings. But you'd realize that when it comes to Windows settings, some key things are here that are not here. Just bear with me one sec while I elaborate more on this. For instance, when you're in the administrative template for both computer configuration and user configuration, you'd realize that we have control panel here. We have control panel here as well. We have desktop for here. We don't have desktop here. When you go to, even let's say for instance, you go to desktop and you go to desktop, over here we have information to do with active desktop wallpaper. This is something that we'll be configuring. And it gives you the option to enable or disable them. Another thing you might want to take note of is in the administrative template, when you go to start menu, for computer configuration, you have notifications, and you can only configure for computer configuration to turn off network usage. So probably you don't want notifications for network usage to be popping up. But when you go to the same menu in the user configuration, for instance, when you go to administrative template and you go to start menu, you go to notification, you realize you have more things that you can configure at a user level rather than a computer level. So let's say, for instance, we are creating this policy for the sales and marketing domain policy, where we want to install the Zoom software and we want to make sure that they have a specific desktop background. So we are going to create this domain policy so that it would be used to install Zoom software and set up a specific desktop background for whoever is going to be logging on, so long as they are in the sales and marketing domain. We're going to do that in a following video, where we would use a whole session to just configure what we want to configure on the policy. But we just want to explore some other things, understanding how the interface is. So this is the editor where you'd manually customize any system setting, any setting that you want to configure. It's a lot of information, it's a lot of things to go through. I'm not going to spend time to go through most of these things. You can pretty much look them up yourself. But if you're following through the lab and you have gotten this configuration yourself, you can follow along and create some of these things and just apply and test in an environment. So basically, these are some of the policies that you can configure when you are in a GPO. So you have software, you have Windows settings, things to do with Windows settings. You have administrative templates to do with how you want control panel to be managed, how you want network to be managed, printers, your start menu, system, which has a whole lot of information to do with shutdown, scripts, removable storage access. I keep on talking about USB. So we have removable disks, whether they can be allowed or disallowed. We might be configuring this in the other videos coming up. And basically, this same kinds of configuration are applicable at two levels, whether at the computer configuration or the user configuration. Whichever use case you're exploring, you just have to set up the one that see fits. Should the policies apply to the computer directly, regardless of whoever is using the computer, then probably use a computer configuration to create your policies. Should it be related to a user? So it means the computer is as it is, it's plain, but whoever logs in with their credentials, say John.Forgel, then we want that policy to kick in to allow him access or not. Then that's where you'll be creating more of the policies in the user configuration. So we have software settings, things to do with software. Windows settings, things to do with how you want the machine to be capable of being managed by the user. Administrative templates to do with things like to do with system, things to do with network, control panel, how they can interact with the computer, Windows components, things to do with task scheduler, file explorer, edge, whether you want, how you want your edge to look like, if you want specific startup tabs to be configured for every user, if you want edge to be clearing cookies by default, things from a security point of view, things like that is what you'll be exploring in these templates. So you can see that there's a mountain of things that you can configure. That's why group policy is a container that you can use, or a tool or a medium you can use to configure settings and apply to users. It's something that as a system administrator you need to be familiar with. So we've explored how to get access to the group policy, we've explored how to create a policy, and then when you create a policy, what are some of the things that you can do within the policy. So like I said, we're going to use a whole video to do some custom changes and set up some custom settings, and then we'll apply it to an OU, which is the sales and marketing. We've already created it, but we haven't done any configurations yet. We'll do that in other videos. I'll see you in the next video where we talk about some key components within the group policy editor that we need to be familiar with. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.